I am Vice President Catherine Katie Rodriguez, 42 years old, and I have a secret that would make my entire extended family question everything they think they know about success and public service. While my cousins see me as the unmarried disappointment who shops at thrift stores and drives a 15-year-old Honda Civic, I was sworn in as Vice President of the United States just 3 months ago after serving in classified intelligence positions for 2 decades. Last Saturday, when my family whispered loud enough for me to hear that I was embarrassing everyone at my cousin Maria's wedding, Agent Sarah Martinez stepped forward and said the words that changed everything. "Madam Vice President, we have an urgent call from the President." Before I tell you how this revelation unfolded at the most inappropriate moment possible and why I've been hiding my political career from my own family, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged by people who only saw what they wanted to see? Have you ever achieved something extraordinary while everyone around you assumed you were failing? Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you. And subscribe, because what happened when my Secret Service detail revealed my identity will show you that public service often requires the ultimate sacrifice of personal recognition. My story begins in East LA, where I grew up in a working-class Mexican-American family that valued traditional success markers: marriage, children, homeownership, and careers that provided financial stability and social respectability. My father worked construction, my mother cleaned houses, and they sacrificed everything to ensure their children could achieve the American dream through education and hard work. "Mija, you're so smart," my mother would tell me throughout childhood. "You can become a teacher or a nurse, something stable that people respect." I was different from my siblings and cousins in ways that became apparent early. While they played normal childhood games, I was reading newspapers, watching political debates, and asking questions about how government decisions affected our community. "Katie wants to save the world," my Aunt Carmen would say with affectionate mockery. "She thinks one person can change everything." My family's response to my political interests was tolerant but concerned. They supported my academic achievements while worrying that my idealism would lead to disappointment in careers that didn't provide financial security or social status. When I got accepted to Georgetown University with scholarships for international relations and political science, the family pride was mixed with anxiety about me leaving home for Washington, D.C. "Katie's going so far away to study government," my grandmother would say. "What kind of job can you get with that?" College was transformational. For the first time, I was surrounded by professors and students who shared my passion for public service and understood that government work could represent the highest form of professional achievement. "Catherine, your understanding of international security issues is exceptional," Dr. Michael Harrison, my advisor, told me during senior year. "Have you considered careers in intelligence or diplomatic service?" I had been considering exactly that since freshman year. The CIA and State Department recruited heavily at Georgetown, looking for candidates with language skills, cultural understanding, and analytical capabilities that could serve American interests around the world. My application included detailed research on Latin American political movements, innovative approaches to counterintelligence operations, and policy recommendations that impressed seasoned government officials who interviewed me for security clearances. The job offer came 2 weeks before graduation. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Director Patricia Williams from the Central Intelligence Agency. We'd like to offer you a position in our Political Analysis Division." The CIA position was everything I had dreamed of: meaningful work that served national security interests, opportunities for advancement based on merit and performance, and the chance to influence policy decisions that affected millions of people. But I couldn't tell my family the significance of this career opportunity. "Katie got a job with the government," my mother told relatives. "Something with foreign policy analysis. It's stable work with good benefits." The reality was far more complex and important than my family understood. CIA political analysts shaped American responses to international crises, provided intelligence assessments that influenced military decisions, and advised senior officials about threats and opportunities that affected global stability. My training was intensive and classified. 6 months of language instruction, cultural immersion, analytical techniques, and security protocols that prepared me for work that few people outside the intelligence community could imagine. Agent Rodriguez, your analytical capabilities are remarkable, my supervisor reported after my first year. You're identifying patterns and connections that veteran analysts are missing. The work was extraordinary but invisible. I was contributing to policy decisions that prevented international conflicts, identified terrorist threats, and protected American interests worldwide, but I couldn't discuss any of it with family or friends. My cover story was deliberately vague and boring. I work for the State Department doing research and writing reports. I would tell relatives who asked about my career. This explanation satisfied most family curiosity while protecting operational security that was essential for both my safety and mission effectiveness. Over the next decade, my responsibilities and security clearances expanded rapidly. I was promoted to senior analyst, then division chief, then deputy director of political intelligence, positions that gave me access to the highest levels of classified information and decision-making authority. Catherine, your strategic thinking has impressed everyone up to the National Security Advisor level, my division director informed me during my 10th year. You're being considered for appointment to senior executive branch positions. At 35, I was recruited for a classified position as Deputy National Security Advisor, one of the most powerful and influential roles in American government, advising the president on international crises and coordinating responses that affected global security. But the security requirements meant my family continued to believe I worked in mid-level government bureaucracy rather than at the center of American foreign policy decision-making. Katie's doing well in her government job, my mother would tell people. She seems to travel a lot for work, but government employees get good vacation time. My travel was actually classified missions to crisis zones, diplomatic meetings with foreign leaders, and security briefings that required immediate presence wherever international events demanded American attention. The disconnect between my actual responsibilities and my family's perception became increasingly surreal during family gatherings where relatives would offer career advice or express concern about my apparent lack of conventional success markers. Katie's 40 and still not married, my aunt would whisper during family parties. She's so focused on work that she's missing out on real life. She still lives in that tiny apartment and drives that old car, my cousin Maria would add. Government work doesn't pay enough for her to build wealth like normal people. These conversations were painful because they reflected genuine love and concern for my happiness, but they were based on complete misunderstanding of my actual circumstances and achievements. My apartment was small because it was located in a secure building near government facilities that provided protection and quick access during emergencies. My car was old because it was armored and modified with communication systems that connected directly to classified networks. My single lifestyle wasn't due to career obsession, but because relationships required security clearances and background investigations that complicated personal connections with anyone outside the intelligence community. Katie seems lonely, my family would say with sympathy. She works so hard, but doesn't seem to have much to show for it. While they worried about my loneliness and apparent lack of achievement, I was briefing the president on international crises, coordinating with foreign intelligence services, and making decisions that affected American security interests worldwide. The irony was overwhelming, but maintaining my cover was essential for both operational security and family safety. High-level government officials face threats that could extend to their relatives, making anonymity a protection for everyone I loved. 2 years ago, everything changed when the president asked me to join his administration as Deputy National Security Advisor, a public appointment that would end my ability to maintain complete secrecy about my career. Catherine, I need someone with your experience and judgment in a visible role, President Matthews explained during our private meeting. Your country needs your service at the highest levels. The appointment required Senate confirmation hearings, public testimony, and media coverage that would reveal my background to anyone paying attention, including my family, if they happened to watch political news. But my relatives had never shown interest in following government appointments or political developments beyond local elections, so my confirmation as Deputy National Security Advisor passed without family notice. Katie got promoted in her government job, my mother told relatives after seeing a brief news mention. She's working more closely with important people now. The understatement was remarkable. I was now attending cabinet meetings, briefing the president daily, and managing American responses to international crises that determined global stability. 6 months ago, the president made an announcement that would change my life completely. Catherine, I want you to be my running mate in the next election. Will you accept the nomination for vice president? The vice presidential nomination was the culmination of 20 years in public service and represented the highest honor that could be given to someone dedicated to serving American interests. Mr. President, I'm honored by your confidence and ready to serve in whatever capacity you believe I can be most effective. The campaign was intense but successful. Election night was surreal as I watched returns showing that Catherine Rodriguez would become the first Latina vice president in American history. But my family remained largely unaware of these developments because they didn't follow national politics closely enough to recognize my name among the hundreds of officials mentioned in news coverage. Katie's still working in Washington doing government stuff, my mother would tell people. She seems busy but doesn't talk much about work. 3 months ago, I was sworn in as Vice President of the United States in a ceremony that was broadcast worldwide and attended by foreign leaders, Supreme Court justices, and every major political figure in American government. My family didn't watch the inauguration. The vice presidential lifestyle required massive security protocols that affected every aspect of daily life. Secret Service protection, armored vehicles, advanced teams that secured locations before my arrival, and communication systems that maintained constant connection to the White House and national security infrastructure. But I still maintained my modest apartment, drove my old Honda when security permitted, and shopped at thrift stores because quality clothing was available at reasonable prices, and I preferred spending money on charitable contributions rather than personal luxury. Madam Vice President, your lifestyle choices are unusual for someone in your position, Agent Sarah Martinez, my Secret Service detail leader, observed during one of our security briefings. Agent Martinez, I entered public service to help people, not to accumulate wealth or status symbols. My spending habits reflect my values, not my income level. The security requirements meant that even simple activities like attending family events required extensive coordination, advanced reconnaissance, and protective measures that were invisible to civilian observers, but essential for vice presidential safety. Last weekend's wedding for my cousin Maria required 3 days of advanced preparation, background checks on all attendees, secure transportation arrangements, and communication protocols that would maintain connection to the White House during family celebrations. Madam Vice President, we've completed security assessments for the wedding venue, Agent Martinez reported. All family members have been cleared, and we have contingency protocols for any emergencies. I arrived at the wedding wearing a simple dress from a thrift store, not because I couldn't afford expensive clothing, but because I preferred modest attire that didn't create social distance between me and my working-class family members. My Secret Service detail maintained discreet positions around the venue, appearing to casual observers as additional wedding guests rather than federal agents protecting the Vice President of the United States. The wedding ceremony was beautiful, celebrating Maria's marriage to her college sweetheart in the same church where our grandparents had been married 60 years earlier. During the reception, conversations followed familiar patterns as family members discussed their achievements, career developments, and lifestyle improvements since our last gathering. Maria looks so beautiful, my Aunt Carmen announced proudly. And David has such a good job with the county. They're going to have a wonderful life together. Carlos just got promoted to supervisor at the factory, added my Uncle Roberto. Sophia's teaching position comes with excellent benefits. Everyone's doing so well. I participated quietly in family conversations, congratulating the newlyweds and sharing appropriate family memories without discussing my own professional circumstances. Katie's still working in Washington, my mother explained to relatives who asked about my career. Government work keeps her busy, but she always makes time for family. As the reception continued, I could hear whispered conversations among relatives about my appearance, lifestyle choices, and apparent lack of conventional success markers. "Look at Katie's dress," my cousin Lucia whispered to her sister. "That's definitely from a thrift store. She's 42 and still shopping secondhand. And that old Honda in the parking lot, that's got to be 15 years old," replied her sister Anna. "Government work must not pay very well." The comments reflected the same pattern of concern and judgment that had characterized family discussions about my life for 2 decades. "It's actually kind of sad," Maria's new mother-in-law observed during a conversation she thought I couldn't hear. "Katie seems like such a nice person, but she's obviously struggling financially. She never married or had children," added my Aunt Teresa. "She's dedicated her whole life to work, but what does she have to show for it?" The assumptions were based on visible evidence that completely misrepresented my actual circumstances. A perfect example of how family members can misunderstand each other's lives when they make judgments based on appearances rather than asking direct questions. During the dinner portion of the reception, Maria stood to thank everyone for celebrating her special day and to acknowledge family members who had contributed to her success and happiness. "I want to thank everyone who helped David and me reach this moment," she said, looking around the room at assembled relatives. "Our family has so many success stories, people who've built careers, raised families, and made our community proud." The speech was heading in a direction that made me uncomfortable, but I hoped she would keep her comments general rather than making specific comparisons between family members' achievements. "Some of us have been blessed with professional success and financial stability," Maria continued, "while others are still finding their way in life." The pointed look in my direction made it clear that I was being categorized in the second group. "Katie, for example, has dedicated herself to public service, even though it hasn't led to the kind of success that our family usually celebrates," she said with artificial warmth. The public characterization of my career as unsuccessful was mortifying, but Maria wasn't finished. "She's wearing thrift store clothes and driving a car that's older than some of our teenagers," Maria announced to laughter from relatives who thought this was good-natured family teasing. "But that's what makes our family special. We love each other regardless of professional achievements or financial circumstances." The condescending speech was delivered with enough artificial affection to appear supportive while actually highlighting what she perceived as my failure to achieve conventional success. I looked around at the faces of relatives who had known me since childhood, people who had watched me excel academically, pursue ambitious goals, and maintain mysterious privacy about my government work. That's when my phone vibrated with an urgent message that would change everything. "Madam Vice President, we have a developing international situation that requires your immediate attention." Agent Martinez approached our table with the professional bearing that immediately commanded attention from everyone nearby. "Excuse me," she said formally, "Madam Vice President, we have an urgent call from the President regarding the situation in Eastern Europe." The entire reception fell silent as 200 family members and wedding guests processed what they had just heard. "Madam Vice President?" my mother whispered in confusion. Agent Martinez realized that her standard protocol had just revealed classified information to civilians who weren't cleared for knowledge about my actual position in government. "Ma'am, I apologize for the security breach," she said quietly. "The international situation requires immediate consultation with the President." I looked around at the shocked faces of family members who were trying to understand how their unsuccessful government worker cousin had just been addressed as Vice President of the United States. "Is this some kind of joke?" Maria asked weakly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my official vice presidential identification, a leather credential case that I carried everywhere but had never shown to anyone outside government security. Opening it slowly, I displayed my official government ID, Catherine Rodriguez, Vice President of the United States of America. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the mariachi band setting up their equipment in the adjacent room. "Katie, you're the Vice President?" my father asked in stunned disbelief. "Yes, Dad. I've been serving in classified government positions for 20 years, and I was sworn in as Vice President 3 months ago." The revelation was spreading through the reception as relatives passed the information to family members who hadn't heard Agent Martinez's announcement. "Our Katie is the vice president," my grandmother said with wonder, apparently trying to process information that contradicted everything she thought she knew about my career and achievements. My mother was staring at me as if seeing a stranger. "Katie, why didn't you tell us?" "Because most of my career has been classified, Mom. I've been working in intelligence and national security positions that couldn't be discussed with anyone outside the government." The explanation helped family members understand that my secrecy hadn't been about embarrassment or shame, but about protecting national security information that affected American interests worldwide. "The thrift store clothes?" Maria asked with embarrassment about her earlier comments. "I shop at thrift stores because I prefer spending money on charitable contributions rather than expensive clothing," I replied diplomatically. "My values haven't changed since becoming vice president." "And the old Honda?" "It's actually armored and equipped with classified communication systems that connect directly to the White House Situation Room." Agent Martinez was coordinating with additional security personnel who had been positioned around the venue, preparing for secure transportation to handle the presidential consultation that had interrupted the family celebration. "Madam Vice President, we have secure communication available whenever you're ready," she announced. The remainder of the wedding reception was surreal as family members adjusted to understanding that their unsuccessful relative was actually the second highest elected official in American government. "Katie, we're so sorry about the things we said," Maria apologized through tears. "We had no idea about your achievements." "Maria, you said what you believed based on the information you had available," I replied graciously. "I understand why you made those assumptions. But you're the Vice President of the United States," she said as if saying the words would help her believe them. "Yes, and I'm also your cousin who loves this family and wanted to celebrate your wedding without creating distractions about my work." The conversations that followed were emotional and complex as relatives processed 20 years of worry and concern being replaced by pride and amazement at achievements they never could have imagined. "Katie, you're going to be in history books," my uncle Roberto said with obvious pride. "Our family produced the vice president." "Our family produced someone who dedicated her life to public service," I corrected gently. "The title is less important than the work itself." Over the following hours, I answered questions about government service, explained why I had maintained secrecy about my career, and tried to help family members understand that my values and love for them hadn't changed despite my professional achievements. "Tia Katie, do you live in the White House?" my teenage nephew asked with excitement. "No, Mijo. The vice president has an official residence, but I still keep my apartment because I like the neighborhood and it feels like home." The wedding celebration continued with completely transformed dynamics as relatives adjusted to understanding that their family had produced one of the most powerful political leaders in American history. As I prepared to handle the presidential consultation that had interrupted the festivities, my family's perception of my life choices had been completely revolutionized. "Katie, we owe you apologies for not understanding what you were building in your career," my father said emotionally. "We were wrong to judge your choices without knowing what you were actually achieving. Dad, you wanted me to be successful and happy. I achieved both, just not in ways that were visible until tonight." The secure phone call with the president lasted 30 minutes and involved coordination with NATO allies about emerging security threats that required immediate American attention. Exactly the kind of work that had occupied my time for 2 decades, while my family assumed I was struggling in mid-level government positions. Today, 6 months after the wedding revelation, my family has become my biggest supporters and advocates for public service careers. "My daughter is the Vice President of the United States," my mother tells everyone proudly. "She's been serving our country her whole career." My nephew has decided he wants to study political science, inspired by the realization that someone from our family could achieve the highest levels of American government. "If Tia Katie can become vice president, maybe I can become president," he tells his friends with complete seriousness. The most important outcome of revealing my career wasn't changed family dynamics or increased respect. It was eliminating the guilt and isolation that came from hiding my greatest achievements from people I loved. Tomorrow, I return to Washington for meetings with foreign leaders and policy decisions that will affect millions of people worldwide. When I make those decisions, I'll be thinking about my working-class family and the values they taught me about service, humility, and dedication to others. Sometimes the person your family thinks has achieved the least is actually serving at the highest levels of government. Sometimes the thrift store shopper is making decisions that affect international security. And sometimes the greatest success is measured not by what you accumulate, but by how many people you serve. If this story resonates with you, please share it with anyone who's been judged for their modest lifestyle while achieving extraordinary things. Have you ever had to hide your accomplishments for reasons others wouldn't understand? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember, true public service often requires sacrificing personal recognition for the greater good.